Alright guys, I'm going to make a quick video for you here. Hopefully this will help you out with this test. This is for the track 3s and for the track 1s. When I'm done the stuff that applies for both and just applies for track 1, I'll let you know. So track 3s if you're watching this, that's fine. Track 1s if you're watching this, that's fine. Like I said before in class, the thing that's going to goof you up is not knowing the vocab. If you know the vocab, you should be in a pretty good spot. I'll go over the vocab again quickly for you. I'm not going to go through every blessed thing in detail. That's your responsibility. But this should help you review a little bit anyway. And I know some of you are auditory learners. It's better when you hear things said out loud. So I'm going to try to do that for you. The first document we're talking about is donum vitae. And that means the gift of life. Donum means gift. Vitae means life. And that's really about things like abortion and in vitro fertilization. Things that put the child in the womb in danger. The terms that are important in this document are in vivio, which means in the womb or in the living, and in vitro, which means in glass. IVF, the letters IVF stands for in vitro fertilization. Now, I'm giving this lecture assuming that you have already printed out the presentation guidelines. If you haven't done that or you don't have them in front of you on the computer, do that and then come back and watch the rest of this video. Okay? That's just a given anymore with these presentations. So, the reason why the church is against in vitro fertilization is not because it's against parents having children or women having children even if they're struggling with infertility. In vitro fertilization is not considered an acceptable or illicit form of fertility as a fertility aid, because what happens is only about 8% of the embryos conceived survive, and so you're literally making 10 babies to give birth to one. It's even less than that. So they might make 20 embryos and 2 will survive and the rest will die. Some call abortion the silent Holocaust. In a way, you could consider in vitro a silent Holocaust as well, if you hold a pro-life perspective, which the church does. If you don't, then it's not even a concern. But it would be a conflict of interest for a pro-life Catholic to do in vitro fertilization if so many children die in the process of giving one child a chance at life. Now, it's also important to note, and this is in the true and false, every child has a soul. Every child is valuable. So if a child is born through in vitro fertilization, praise God. The only thing the church could wish for is that every child conceived through in vitro fertilization could be born instead of being frozen or instead of dying in the process. But the reality is the majority of embryos die in the process, and it's not considered an acceptable way to have children because we're pro-life. But if you were personally conceived through in vitro, praise God that you are here, and praise God for the love your parents have for you. And the church is just saying, going forward, that's not the healthiest and best way to do things. So it's not a judgment on people who've struggled with that. In fact, in the document Donum Vitae, and this is all in the true and false, but in the document Donum Vitae, the church is very clear that it understands the desire to have children. And it understands the desire to have children and the struggle a family can have when they're struggling with fertility, like my family had. Okay, the other terms that kind of get complicated. The word licit, L-I-C-I-T, means that it is acceptable. It's morally okay. If it's illicit, I-L-L-I-C-I-T, it's not morally acceptable. If something is admissible, that means it is acceptable morally. If it is inadmissible, it is not acceptable morally. Okay, some scientific terms. Parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis is when you take a woman's egg, and with just the woman's egg, without the man's sperm, scientists engineer a child. Parthenogenesis would violate church teaching. Twin fission would also violate church teaching. It's artificial twin fission, when scientists force an embryo to split and to create a second child, and sometimes those are used for therapeutic purposes, and that is not acceptable.
Extension 241, Diane Ante, please call extension 241.
Okay, conjugal just means sex, between a married couple. Heterologous IVF and homologous IVF. Heterologous IVF is when you use a donor sperm or a donor egg, because the man's sperm or the woman's egg within the marriage, one of those things is not working properly. And so heterologous, hetero means different. That's when you get a different or separate donor to give you a sperm or egg. So if my wife and I had heterologous IVF, maybe they would not use my wife's egg because it wasn't good, but they would use my sperm with a random woman's egg. The church is against that really because it's IVF, in vitro fertilization, but also that can be a complicating factor, the fact that it's heterologous. There's a distinction to be made between that and homologous IVF, where you're using the husband's sperm and the woman's egg. But that also violates church teaching because it's in vitro fertilization, and the majority of children do not survive the process. Fecund means that you're able to have children, means fertile. Let's see. Therapeutic means that it's something done for the health of somebody. It's medicine. It's a cure. The church is for therapeutic, for treating a child in the womb therapeutically, but it is not for experimentation on a child in the womb to try to find a cure for Parkinson's, for example. You would only treat a child in the womb therapeutically, not experimentally. Let's see. What else is important for you guys? I think that covers a lot of things. Donum Vitae is written in the 1980s, and so it's a relatively recent document. You want to know that whatever is technically possible is not morally admissible. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it scientifically. There are lots of things we can do scientifically that we shouldn't do. Be sure that you know what selective reduction is. You want to know that for the test. When it comes to the amendments, you want to know that the 13th Amendment ends slavery. The 15th Amendment gives anyone of any race the right to vote. You should know that the Republican Party is the party that pushed for the abolition or the ending of slavery. The Democratic Party, the majority of them opposed that, and eventually Democrats were won over. But it speaks to the fact that you can't look to one party or another to represent the totality of moral truth. You can only look to God to represent the totality of moral truth, and we have to be careful not to make our politicians gods. The church teaches that abortion does violate natural law, and the U.S. government follows natural law, not revealed law. The church follows natural and revealed law. All right, that review would apply to both the Track 3s and the Track 1s. Going forward here, this is the stuff that's only for Track 1s. So Track 3s you can tune out now, and good luck on your test tomorrow. Okay, Track 1s. You want to know that humane means human. You want to be sure that you know what cloning is. You want to know what inordinate means. Let's see. It would be helpful to know when St. Thomas and St. Augustine were alive, at least a general sense of that. You should already know that. Remember that from previous tests. You should know that the church said that artificial birth control would produce more marital infidelity. It said that in the 1960s. You should know what the church teaches about sterilization. You should know what the church teaches about its authority over natural law and its role in relationship to natural law. You should know what NFP is. You should know what IVF is. You should also understand this about the pill. The pill for a woman, the various forms of the pill, it almost doesn't matter. What the pill first does is tries to prevent a woman from ovulating and prevent the sperm from reaching the egg. If that doesn't work, about a third of the time what the pill does is it actually, the egg will become fertilized and you'll have a new life with new DNA, which the church would consider an embryo. And then what happens is it does not allow that embryo to attach inside the woman's uterus, inside of her well, inside of her womb. And so a child is conceived, but the child is not able to hold on and is basically flushed out of the system when the woman urinates. It actually is, I mean, technically it's an abortion. Critics of Catholicism say, well, there are millions of abortions every year by Catholic women because many Catholic women are using contraceptives through the form of the pill. And they're right. I mean, that is an abortion by the definition. And the child has been conceived, and then the child is flushed from the system. Most women aren't aware of that when it comes to the pill. Heck, Mitt Romney wasn't aware of that during the presidential election, and Mitt Romney was made to look like a fool by the Democrats because he couldn't answer questions about that. As a Catholic, you should be able to answer questions about that. The Church gives pretty clear teachings on that. So actually, the pill actually starts to venture into the arena of pro-life. If you really are strictly pro-life, it's kind of hard to be on the pill because the pill technically aborts children. If you are against the morning after pill, you kind of have to be against the pill totally because the pill does what the morning after pill does, at least a third of the time. So that's why the Church takes such a strong stance against artificial contraception, particularly with the pill. Most people don't think it through that much, but the Church does, and we should, and frankly our politicians should as well, at least so they can answer questions with clarity, no matter where they stand on these issues, and no matter how they feel natural law reveals these issues.
Mrs. Pesci, please call 271. Mrs. Pesci, please call 271.
That all is for the, that all shows up in the true and false. Be sure you've paid attention to that stuff. Understand what the Church says towards women struggling with fertility. Be sure you have those questions answered. And really also know that, that there's a certain term that comes from Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. So be sure that you're aware of that as well. I've given you a lot of help here. Quite honestly, if you know everything I just shared with you, my gosh, I think you could get 100. You'll certainly be in the 90s. I gave you more help now than probably I should have. But this will help you out. I felt like I didn't give a great review in class because we showed that video, which I felt was important and relevant for bioethics. And I wanted to be sure I treated you fairly. I know your grades mean a lot to you guys, and I wish you every success. So hopefully this helps. God bless, and good luck tomorrow. See you guys.